Hello, everyone. So you just heard you had an Irishman and a Scotsman. You don't get English, you get Canadian, so sorry. Close. Sort of a blend of the above, right? Thanks for coming. The last session, this is the last session before lunch, so I promise I'll keep it to 40 or 50 slides. I'll try and skip through a few. I hope to share with you, the title today is Learning from Other Regulatory Industries. So this is a higher level view of what are we facing. It's a little bit about philosophy. It's a little bit about what we're seeing other manufacturing companies do successfully, but also what pitfalls to potentially avoid. Hopefully we'll get through them. I have two bonus slides at the end. We're going to talk specifically a little bit about OEM specific and CRA challenges, because it's an underlying or a follow-on from what we're talking about here today. So introductions and background, just a little bit about myself and what we want to talk about. Setting the stage, I kind of do those both in the first slide. And then I want to talk a little bit about what are we addressing here? Is it culture or is it a process, right? Is this another function or is this a change in the way we think and the way the industry is going to behave? And it's all about data. We can't get away from it, but it's not just raw data. It's not just individual indicators. It's not data without context. It has to have meaning. And so I'm going to walk through a little bit of how you build that. And if you do it right, how more powerful you are, not only for regulatory, but for multiple other business initiatives. So first and foremost, I've been practicing OT security since about 2001, way before it was super sexy and fun. And all of you come here, there's maybe 20 people in the room, which did this 20 years ago. But the scary part for me is I think I'm saying the same stuff 25 years later. We're still filling rooms and people are still writing things down. So we've obviously got some room to improve, right? In 2003-ish, 5-ish, and I know this is the N in NERC is North American, but they have spinning equipment, PLCs, relays and controllers, et cetera, and they have to take IT practices and prove it in a regulatory environment, in a production environment. We can learn from that. Even though it's from a different industry with different language, et cetera, the basic tenets are still the same. The things that scare me about it is it's over 20 years old and it continues to get hardened and locked down and added to and modified, et cetera. In fact, one of the things I'll talk about later is never say never. Originally, there was no purview whatsoever for any of this data to be in the cloud. Now they're coming out with cloud-based exceptions or management for regulatory stuff because we just have to evolve. What have we learned? Two very large things. First one, this must be treated like a program, not a task. Every single one of these conferences I would go to and present on NERC-CIP or newer stuff like TSA regulations for pipelines or et cetera, you'd always get someone, an end user, present, here's what we did for our network segmentation or secure remote access or our electronic perimeter. And invariably, you'd get someone put a hand up and say, how did you know which sites to worry about and which ones you could ignore? In other words, to me, this is a checklist, an item I need to get past and put it behind me. You'd get others who'd come up and say, we knew what the standard was for and where we're trying to get to, so we built it into our multi-year plan, and that's how our standard is for all these sites, and now we can pivot into all these other functions. This is the choice you have to make. I know you've already invested in things. There's politics, there's investment, there's sunk cost, et cetera. But at the end of the day, are we simply trying to get a checkbox, or are we trying to do what's right? Now, I put up Duke here as an example, only because it's public. I got a reference slide. We're going to walk through a little bit about how Duke is the epitome of trying to build checklists and live with it without having to fully properly embrace it. Is anyone familiar with the Duke energy compliance thing a few years ago? Okay, I'll leave it the punchline. You'll be excited when we get there. Secondly, data is king. The previous speaker said it's hard to get to the endpoints. Correct. It's not hard to get data. It's hard to interpret it. I turned on, and for those of you who've seen this speech before, we turned on a vulnerability tool in a gas plant. We found 27,000 vulnerabilities. Interesting, right? Look, we're getting to something. Well, it's pretty useless. He knew he had a bunch. He just didn't know how many. Still doesn't know what to do about it, what order to do them, how far to go. You're never going to get it to zero. In fact, just today we were talking to a mining client, and they have IT. Tell me if this sounds familiar. IT was looking at something. They have a general idea of what they have out there, either by traffic or by vendor name, because they know they use this vendor or that vendor. And they said, you have this critical vulnerability within our corporate standards of governance. It means you have to correct it within X number of business days. So the mine processing facility, taking the big giant chunks of metal and ground and grinding it up and getting it sent off to different places, is getting ready to do an unplanned outage. Somebody dispatches the intern to go figure out which IP address this belongs to and what it's doing. So getting ready to do this unplanned outage, take a big outage, take a lot of money off the line, etc. Kid comes running back and she says, it's a printer. Right? So what do? We unplug the printer, use the other 7. We keep working forward, which is a good and a bad thing. But the point is, it's context, right? A list of vulns, a list of IP addresses is nothing if you don't know what you're talking about. So we're going to spend a fair bit of time on that one. So the one thing I want to warn you about why you should get into a culture, and I grabbed the German reference for you, because apparently it's a common. Are you familiar with this story? If you give a mouse a cookie, is what it's called. You give the mouse a cookie and it says, well, that's lovely, but now I could use a glass of milk to maybe wash it down. And then, well, maybe I should check if I have crumbs in my whiskers. Can I borrow a mirror? And, oh, my hair's messy. Can I borrow a comb to comb it? This is the warning. That's a horrible graphic. But this is the warning that I wanted to tell you about with respect to the regulatory compliance. If you were thinking you could do quick check boxes, put it behind you, the foreshadowing that I'm trying to leave here is get out in front of it as a program. Lead so that you are the one answering and leading as opposed to the one always reacting. In the future, what seems simple and straightforward today will become difficult, if not impossible to execute. I don't mean what's being asked of us. I mean, if you don't build the tools correctly. If you build individual silos of tools, we have a number of clients who still try to do their base inventory on spreadsheets with change control, because everybody follows every detail of every change on every change control. And then they hire an intern every spring to go and double check that what they had since the last year is still accurate. And sure enough, they make a bunch of edits. It's an option, but it's not scalable. So I'm advocating, if you take nothing else out of this, prepare to build a sustainable culture, not execute regulatory tasks. How many people, by the way, have cybersecurity language in their procurement contracts and their RFPs? Okay. How many people that are operating companies don't? Okay, good. Very honest, thank you. When I was at Honeywell, we had to put all this cybersecurity as optional because the minimum compliant bid was Honeywell versus Yokogawa versus whatever, and it came to a low price. Anyways, we're evolving. So here's Duke. Why is this a warning? I never sell on FUD. I hate FUD. I really, really do. But I'd be remiss in my responsibility to share with you what I've seen firsthand over the last 25 years if I didn't share this example. So what happened with Duke was they stood up individual inventory tools. They used SCCM or WSUS to maybe do some patching. They had some templates that the different sites had to fill out and send up to the regulatory team. There was no quality control. There was no consistency amongst them. They were actually found by lack of managerial oversight, process deficiencies, inadequate training, and lack of internal controls. Individual siloed tools with best effort to bring them up to date will never survive. The record fine, by the way, since you don't know anything about it, did anyone want to guess? $10 million. They negotiated a one-time $10 million fine, tore it down, and rebuilt the program from scratch. They did it twice because 10 years earlier, they put together individual tools and expected people to follow a change process. When it fell down, they had to start all over again. So again, I hate fear, uncertainty, doubt sort of stuff, but we've seen bad sides. So let's flip to positive. What can we do? What should we be doing? Let's first remember what is cybersecurity. It's an always-on program. See the subtitle? It's the function of protecting assets from electronic harm or failure, intentional or otherwise. Many OT, and there was a great presentation earlier about incident response. Most often in OT, incident response is get it back up and running. We don't necessarily do forensics. Do we even know if it's cyber? Maybe not. Do we care? Probably not. It's about the safe, expected, reliable operation of the facility. Secondly, it's a program, not a piece of software or hardware, and its intent needs to be baked into every aspect of daily operations. How many operators have their individual sites being tasked at the end of the year with uptime related to cyber or cyber hygiene? Not yet? Couple? Yeah. I always joke that I can retire when I drive up to a facility and I see so many days since a safety incident and so many days since a cyber incident. Not yet, but we'll get there. Properly executed cyber program provides availability, scalability, reliability, security, safety, resiliency. Now, how many not only have to run the plant, keep it secure, and report to regulatory, but are now being asked for other data points for model predictive control, for production enhancement and better output, and et cetera, right? If you have all the core capabilities and the infrastructure and the stability, you can start to feed multiple masters. So this isn't a direct correlation to digital initiatives, but it certainly facilitates it and helps you understand what size and shape those things need to be. Most importantly, it's people executing established process enabled by technology. Okay? We can't lead with technology, we need to lead with outcomes. Sounds very contrite, but it's important. Now, why? Why is this a challenge? Who has seen this before? I've used this multiple times because I think it's very, very valuable. I'm just checking the time to see how much longer I get to torture you. Anybody? Okay. It's, wow, our new marketing person didn't put a lot of references. There's a reference in the speaker notes, I'll make sure you get it. This is the ISA 99 committee of the patching urgency, OT patching urgency decision tree. Nice big name. Essentially, I want to go through a couple quick highlights, right? This is the way we think in OT. Identify vulnerability or patch. Does it affect ICS? Yes. Sorry, does it affect ICS? No. What do? Back to work. We accept the debt. We build on that debt every time something new comes out. Not always, but this is traditionally what it's been. We find a vulnerability. Does it affect ICS? Yes. Is there a workaround? Yes. We're going to go back to work. We may document it, but there's something else we could do. And that's totally acceptable. The previous speaker was talking about we can't just patch things, we can't just take outages, etc. That same mining client that had the printer problem, that outage was going to cost them $40 million for the proposed down and up and back up and running. So if we decide that it affects ICS and there's not necessarily a workaround, or even to be able to decide this part, we need this. Now, how many people think they would get that from a vulnerability report? Please don't put your hand up. That's a trick question. You will be told what you have and where you have it, but you don't know what the impact is until you map it to a particular asset and put the context of that asset into the discussion. Well, it's right. It is the comment was a typical business mindset, but not OT. The reality is we need to start to adopt some of these things to be able to keep up. So then can we analyze risk and then decide what we need to do? This is where we're going to talk about how to build context today. So what we see, this still isn't working. This is supposed to animate nicely so you don't read ahead of me. I have to talk quickly now. People often start with an inventory tool. You need inventory, 100%. Okay? Is it a spreadsheet? Is it Maximo? Is it Active Directory? You need to decide. But this, if you don't get it right, gets really off the rails by the time you get down the road, right? We're heading down the road. We're off by a few inches. We're in the ditch a couple miles down. Well, imagine if you're way off or you have thousands of assets. Vulnerability mapping. A lot of people like to use existing IT tools because IT bought it and they say, here, you can have it for free on the OT side or you can do it and we can look at it. You know that most of them map IT applications? Their library is only as good as what they research and actually map to and have the capability to look at. Do they have OS applications? Kiwi Syslog, Wonderware, Oasis, etc.? And how about PLCs? A lot of those tools don't get to, and they do maybe sort of. Do they get to nested PLCs? They get to legacy PLCs. They get to gateways like Schweitzer has in front of serial connected protective relays. Here's the big one. Asset impact or criticality. Is that just today in tribal knowledge and is walking out the door every time you have somebody retire? Maybe. Is it written somewhere? Maybe. Can we infer it from 20, 30 years or with Rockwell 120 years in manufacturing? Probably. But the real knowledge, the real value, not only is something you want to capture, but absolutely has to be brought into the calculation of overall risk. Patching tools. We talk about patching. Patching is a dirty word in OT. You do still need to do it. We hear new things that marketing dreams up called virtual patching. I guess what it means is hardening the system or disabling services as opposed to applying the patch, which is a noble thing to do and you should do. But we need to be able to understand not just OS, but our applications. And then backups. This is something that will never change in OT. Do we have a restore point? Can we get back up and running? Talked about that a little bit earlier. You need to make sure that all of these are factored into your risk profile. If you do them in silos like that, you will have to navigate between each of them. Just imagine you have a vulnerability comes out and you go to that vulnerability dashboard and it's got a way to represent your assets or your report. Now you need to go to the backup tool and say, okay, what was the name of that device? What was the IP address? It's got a different naming convention. Is it represented differently? Okay, now I got to grab those and put them in a spreadsheet and see what the impact is for my HasOps or my Maximo. How do you stitch that together? right? It makes it harder if you don't tie them together. So, and how do you update shit and cross-reference? Well, Power BI, right? Everyone's got Power BI. Everybody likes that? Easy to use. You start to build Power BI over your silos of information. Now you are a software developer on top of being an operational engineer or what have you. Not a bad idea, but you're, again, taking on more and more challenge. Here's what you need to get to, though. This is the big reveal. As I've been talking about asset inventory in different contexts, have you started to think about the things you want to know about your assets beyond IP or if there's a vol on it? I hope so, because this is what you really should be chasing. You should have every single component of these types of actual indicators across all of these. These all relate to those individual OT assets. These all relate to whether you have to act now, in a day, a week, a month, a year, or just accept it, but be able to defend why you've accepted it. Talking about regulatory reporting, what do you have? Why do you have it? Why did you act? Why didn't you act? Comes from this sort of stuff. I'm not going to go through all of it. We will share the slides after. I think the recording will also be available, but this is where we want to start. And then what you do is you build your own profile. Now, you start with the asset. You have to get this right. You have to get all your assets, again, or you're way off by the time you get to the top, or at least you have, best case scenario, if you don't have all your assets, you at least have a subset of risk. It's better than no risk, but it's better to get them all. You then want to get operational impact. And by the way, when I say all the assets, I mean those nested PLCs. I mean those, serial to Ethernet converters. I mean those remote access points. I mean across low bandwidth SCADA deployments as well. Then what you want is that tribal knowledge that's walking out the door. What's the impact of these assets? That printer in that mining example is not impactful. That takes my risk down to zero, even though I may have a critical vol, at least in the interim, until the next planned outage. Then you want to map your external indicators of risk, all known vulnerabilities, all known exploits, product notices from your vendors, end of life status from your vendors. You want to understand any sort of threat data you want to put in there, because I now know what I have, how old it is, how crippled it is, how poorly configured it is, how poorly patched it is. I know what it means to me if it goes away or gets compromised. And now I'm starting to see what the likelihood is of whether that will happen to me. And then finally, you do have some defense. You do have backups. You do have ladder logic check-ins. You do have snapshots. You do have digital bare metal restore. You have redundant HMIs and engineering stations. That's great. That has to be factored in. Microsegmentation. What you then do is you add, of all those different components, the risk factors: presence of a vuln, lack of a backup, impact of the asset, where it is in the network, layer 3, layer 2, whatever, if it's redundant or not. And you put your weightings on them so that you can tailor to your organization and your risk tolerance exactly what is more or less important to you. If you do it right, that data gets automated into the database, both from the asset, from the threats, from the backups. Your calculations run, you come in the morning and you see that last night 3 new vulns were unleashed. You got higher risk scores. 3 backups failed. You got higher risk scores. You spend the day correcting them. You bring those risk scores back down. You not only can show what you're doing, you can show trends to the regulator, or you could show trends to management that we continue to fall a step behind every quarter, every year, right? It's insight. We all run feedback loops in our process environment to get the best possible product and quality and uptime. Why aren't we doing it with stuff like this that could take us off the rails? Okay, you then are able to calculate risk scores automatically, and then you could build behaviors. If you like. When do we act on these things? How fast do we act on these things? Do we act on these things? You want to accept a risk? You better be able to defend and explain why and under what circumstances. This allows you to do that. It also, again, I hate going here, but in a regulatory world, whether you're arguing internally with management or the budget, or whether you're arguing externally with regulators and auditors, you have the ability to defend what you did, what you said, when and where and how. And if you keep saying something and nothing ever changes, at least you've got an evidence of the fact that we've been trying. We just haven't made any progress. Preferably, I'd like to see that we're saying, look at the progress we are making. Look at the project we just did and how we took the average risk score down, etc. So it comes down to this. Contextual risk score is a combination of the actual asset Plus, it's context. We need to know what we're talking about. Not all assets are created equal in OT. Every single one of you with an operations background knows when this particular system goes down, it means a nuisance or it means canceling my evening or weekend plans. You need external risk indicators, and you need compensating controls. Pull in what you have. We have clients that are using the end of life and operational context with risk to not only segment a facility, but within the facility to segment different production areas. Within the production areas, put a budget in a year or two now to actually segment each and every individual production line. So if you did get compromised somewhere along the way, there's way less single points of failure and a much smaller footprint should something happen. It's all justified though by the data because you see what risk you have before and the risk scores after. So to conclude, the resulting benefits, because I wanted to go beyond just pure risk and regulatory for a second. Your actions, let's start over here at outcomes. You would then be able to see contextual risk by site, production area, production line, asset, geography, brand recognition, revenue recognition. You would be able to see the causes. How about capital planning for obsolescence? How about vulnerability for taking outages or planning or testing? How about configuration and system hardening, the virtual patching we're talking about? Review of users, secure remote access. We talked about user management over here. That would be a great way to justify this type of project. Look how many users we have and how they're sharing accounts or what they're doing. How do we get better at it? Redundancy, backup, endpoint detection response, monitoring, SOC, etc. And those turn into actions. You can now justify and scale and size system hardening programs, software updates, patching, user management, regulatory reporting. Or near term, hey, our backups are kind of crappy. Let's rebuild those. Long term, end of life, capital planning, etc. So I'm not sure why this one's here. Oh, I see what happened. Okay, so we're going to just do this for a second. Pretend like you're not watching. See, all those animations are there. They put them side by side. I should have skipped through the first one. Anyways, I'll get to where I was. We're almost there. All right. If you do it right and you automate it, you can aggregate that view at the top. You're not having to do this in every single little site. You do need the technology at the site to pull from its location. You do need to connect to the databases that serve up the antivirus or the backup status at the various locations. But you can aggregate this at the top so that you have those scarce IT/OT resources, the collaboration we're talking about, to be able to understand your risk corporately, globally, what have you, design a resolution, and then consistently apply it. You don't have to have armies everywhere. You don't have to take one person and have them manage the globe. You can have a few people here collectively look at the entire risk profile of the entire environment. We have clients today that have over 700 facilities worldwide that are being managed by a team of 3 up here. Okay, what are the takeaways? Asset inventory and visibility. I'm jumping through a bit because I want to get to the OEM slides, the bonus content. Vulnerability identification and context. We don't take a $40 million plant down for a printer. Risk prioritization, governance and process. Some of the things you're seeing in risk scores will show where things are failing, like user management or network segmentation or secure remote access. And communication and culture. This is a continuous feedback loop. Now, what does success look like? Global food and bev manufacturer. We first put some technology in to see what was going on, help them figure this out, build that contextual asset. We're in Eastern Canada, Cambridge, Ontario. As soon as we got on there, we were seeing PLCs and relays that were naming convention telling us they were in Malaysia. Not a surprise. They also thought they had 4,000 assets. Well, they have 20,000. Right? They were very, very reactive. They were playing whack-a-mole like at the fair where the gopher pops up and you try and hit it while it's there and move on. Today, they have empirical evidence of progress as well as resource needs. They built a multi-year end-of-life migration program. They're actually going to the board and saying, here's our capital budget. They have a map of the world with all their sites, and the logos over the locations of their sites are colored gold, silver, or bronze, directly correlating to revenue. That's who you're talking to, what they understand. That's where you get the money from. Again, back to a business perspective. They're launching multiple digital improvement and factory of the future projects and are leading the manufacturing industry with their maturity. They're very much proactive. So, summary, and I'll get to the OEM stuff in one second. Regulatory challenge is best met with programmatic mindset and approach. Regulations today are a starting point. starting point, not a simple or defined task you must execute. And winners will understand the future need and evolve to the fluid needs, but based on automated, aggregated data. Now, this far right one, how does this help the OEMs? Are there any quick questions before I jump? I don't want to disrupt, but I do want to get to my take on how this would be potentially managed by OEMs who then have a very different dynamic of shipping machines elsewhere, as opposed to having it within their own four walls. Yes, sir.
Lodi here. I just switched from financial industry to a retail industry. All that you're mentioning is something I've been doing in 2016 in IT over there. Mm-hmm. So I'm just trying to see, since I'm new, what's the real challenge that is holding OT back? I've heard people don't like to do patching because of downtime and everything. But like the context that you establish about the risk to the processes and business processes is very old, as you said, 20-year-old concept. So what's the real challenge, and how do you recommend to overcome it?
So underlying, and thank you for the question. So the underlying that is a presumption that the people in the room come from the OT perspective, which you just identified you didn't. There's OS-based devices, there's switchgear, et cetera, but there's a third rail. It's called PLCs, relays, controllers. Sometimes it's 70, 80, or 90% of the assets, and they sometimes are antiquated. In those OSs, you can range as far back as Windows NT still. We see it, right? And the downtime or an outage of a trip or a mistake where you trip a switch or a network gear and safety systems kick in can be in the millions, if not safety issues. Those are at the surface the hardest reasons why we have such a diverse environment. It's fairly fragile. It's very complex. 90% of IT tools don't get into the nooks and crannies or are overly invasive. So the challenge is in getting the data safely and getting it completely from all those nooks and crannies. In a nutshell, I'd be happy to pick this up more with you a little bit later. I just want to continue through because it's a great starter, but we could spend 3 days on that if you want. Okay. What's that? Yeah, only. That's part of the problem. And you know what? Thank you. Not to make an example, but that is exactly what we need to do with this education. And what we're trying to get to is you go to IT and you say, look, I have all these things and I can't do these things. I have to do plan B or plan C. That's what that flow chart was all about. We have a client that wasn't allowed to put their patch on because of productivity, and the vendor didn't test it and prove it yet. We went and figured out from that team at the top that it was just a couple registry edits. So we tested on a safe box. It was good. We rolled it over. We took the risk out without patching. That's a very OT application of identifying a risk and doing something about it that has nothing to do with IT. That's why it's hard, is what I just said is the exception, not the rule. Absolutely. So, quick. So the correct proposed method, and do I have time? I am keeping you from lunch, but you know what? Let's be honest. The first batch of food has been out for 20 minutes. You want the refresh after. It's going to be much better for you. Your current proposed method and data storage is powerful that I just talked about, but it's predicated on the ability to access data from the asset. So an OEM is going to build a machine, ship it somewhere, and now they're on the hook to somehow know what's going on over there, right? Current OEM market builds and ships. Many, if not most, end users do not grant access to the machines after shipping. In the new world, we'll collectively need to share data, if from end users, to the OEMs in order to manage ongoing compliance and risk tracking. Imagine if you are your machine builder, you ship 1,000 machines this year. And you have all sorts of components. All your vendors upstream are telling you, oh, product nodes here, product nodes there. You need to figure out how to map that back to these things. This is the challenge. It's going to become huge. This model is built upon existing OT risk management technology. So we are doing this with OEMs today, where they're putting this technology that I'm talking about onto a machine. It's checking in, they're building a birth certificate the day it ships, and we're negotiating how we would update from that machine back to that database so the OEM could keep an eye on it and then tell you when something went wrong, because that's now their obligation, right? Now, all sorts of discussions around how to connect really small, one-way, outbound, encrypted, no IP, no ladder logic, whatever. We have to get through those things. But this is where we're starting to look. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Love my German friends, but you also love to engineer the heck out of something. You're going to be building your own software and automated scripted spreadsheets and stuff like that. We're not here to be software developers. We're here to be engineers. The only ask to allow this would be a one-way outbound push to the OM master database. Just something to think about. It's a debate. I'm going to drop it. We're going to go have lunch, networking later today or back around the booth tomorrow. We can argue what's good, bad, and ugly. I just wanted to point out, why do I think that's an option? Well, one of the things I have learned in my 25 years is never say never. As slow as we are, as behind as we are, as backwards as we are, stuff still happens. Will you say OT's not connected? Well, it is. Nothing's air gapped. There's no such thing. Data downs went in, now they went out. Well, we don't want other people coming into our environment. Well, if we do outbound and if it's regulated that we have to have people tell us what's in our environment, we're going to have to find a way to navigate that. Third, we don't want to put data in the cloud. Well, how many people are using cloud now? Right? Conclusion, we'll one day, likely very soon, have to embrace the next step in the evolution of OT networks and data. And I'm hoping to show you that what some of the leaders in this space are and regulatory challenges to become a speed bump as opposed to a major obstacle would be facilitated by this type of automated contextual data approach. So thank you very much for staying a couple moments late.